We're going to start with everybody introducing themselves and in one sentence saying something that concerns you tonight. And then we'll begin to have a bigger conversation. But I'm going to say one sentence, because if we've got 25 people here now and everybody went on for 5 minutes, we'd be done before everybody was finished. So that's my only rule. In the introduction, one sentence. But
I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to say quickly that we are going to have translation, Spanish translation via the chat. So yes, Alfonso, you can start translating. Bienvenidos a todos de nuestro grupo hispano y de la misa de las 2:30. La conversación va a ser en inglés, pero si miran en el chat, vamos a tener todo traducido.
Ok.
Empezando ahora.
Ok, gracias.
Bien, great, because it's too important. Lisa, I feel terrible for asking this, but tell me again, what is your mother's name?
Geraldine.
Geraldine, that's right. All right, I'm going to really work hard not to forget that again. So, Lydia, we think we're safe to start?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to throw to Father Kelly to welcome everybody. Who is muted?
Welcome to everybody. Bienvenidos a todos. We had such a good conversation 2 weeks ago. We decided to continue. And rather than spend a lot of time in going on what Jane had already described, I think, Jane, you're going to get the ball rolling in terms of engagement and how we're going to go about getting everybody in the conversation.
Great. Before I do that, Lydia, I just got a text from Kathy Fraser. Can you send her the Zoom information so she can get in? Kathy Kasbach Fraser?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We decided 2 weeks ago to have a conversation with you guys because we knew that we were missing seeing each other and there were lots of things going on we wanted to talk about. 2 weeks ago, we were thinking that really what we wanted to talk about was how we were called to be a Eucharistic people at a time in our country and in our church when we couldn't come to church together. And so 35 of us got together and talked about all of this. And then we said, this was a really good conversation. We'll meet again in 2 weeks and we'll talk some more about this. Little did we know that in the last 2 weeks, so much in our pandemic world would change. So the question tonight that we're starting with is, what are you concerned about today? And it might still be what we were talking about 2 weeks ago. It might be something else, but we just kind of want to give people a chance to introduce themselves and say what you're thinking about, what you're concerned about, and then we'll move on from there. We're going to take about an hour together. Okay, so, I realize not everybody has the same screen, right? So it's a free-for-all. Whoever wants to start us off, extroverts, begin.
I'm going to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now, yes. Hi, Siobhan.
Hi, my name is Siobhan. I know most of you know my father, Tom Taft. I'm just going to jump right in and say what concerns me at the moment, given our times of social unrest, is my 9-year-old, who some of you may know as well, also Thomas, has many, many questions. Some basic questions about how do I act in these times? How is God letting this happen? And it's hard to come together as a community and explain and answer these questions. That's what's concerning me now, especially when we're separated as a community.
Great, thanks.
Well,
my name is Brother Tim Smith. I'm an Eppin Rice Irish Christian brother. And I guess what I'm concerned about right now is the lack of positive media about some of the things that are going on, like peaceful protests that aren't real, you're not really seeing.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
I'm Virginia Dorgan, Sister Virginia Dorgan, parishioner. I'm seeing a lot of resources about white supremacy and white privilege. And I'm trying to spread some of that around because it's a situation that we don't know about or how to handle.
Thanks, Ginny. You can't all be this shy to just introduce yourself or we'll never get anywhere.
Hi, it's Tino Latore. How's it going?
Hi, Tina.
I would think my concern now is people who are infirmed, whether it's by age or some type of medical issue, or just the fear of just going out, and people who are alone and dealing with this all by themselves, and they don't have any type of means like a computer or even a cell phone to talk to anyone, and they're going through this all by themselves. And that really concerns me right now.
Thanks, Tino.
I'll go.
Okay.
I'm Laura Goodall, and some of you may know me. For those of you who don't, I have 2 children who are generally very loud and disruptive in mass. So maybe that will do it for you. I think for me, since the beginning of the pandemic, I think there's 2 major topics here. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I have been very concerned about people who suffer domestic violence, especially children who don't get an outlet. Like normally children at least get to go to school, and now they're just all day long in an abusive situation. And I am not familiar really with the social services, so I don't know to the extent they're being serviced currently, but that is something I think about a lot. And then in terms of the kind of the current stand that this country is making against an ongoing oppression, I think, it's upsetting, but then I just feel guilty, honestly, that I find it upsetting because it's not like this is new. And why am I only now getting really upset about it because it's in my face? And so I feel a little bit of guilt associated with that.
Got it. Thanks, Laura.
Kristen, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. My suggestion mirrors my concern, and my suggestion is one I have to thank Kathleen Kennett for because she sent it out today. But and Ginny also mentioned all the good resources. Father Brian Massagill's piece on white privilege is one you should read, Laura, because he makes it clear that it's not about guilt. What it's about is recognizing the roots of racism, and even more, recognizing what we have, what you have, what I have, even if we're not materially well-resourced. What we have is a sense of privilege that we didn't seek. It is just built in to the structure. And if you read him, you will feel less guilty and more ready. I think we all will, to take some collective action. But it's small. It's talking to people, etc.
Kathleen.
I'm Kathleen Kennett, Religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary. I am just grateful to be in community with all of you and with the church. I have so much to say, so I'm going to say very little. I just hope that what we do is that we won't want to go back to normal when we reflect on what we want to do, and that we will think in terms of transformation. And when we think in terms of transformation, We're talking about structural change on all levels of our lives. So that I just hope that we're able to do that as we are in community together. And
Thank you, Kathleen. So I'm just going to ask the people who haven't introduced themselves yet to do so, just so we can move on. So, and I'm going in order on my screen. Lois?
Oh, hi. I was going to be quiet for a change. I just want at some point to give an idea of how you could distribute the Eucharist on Sunday with not anybody touching it but yourself, because I think we could all have a fix, and you could probably from some mail company, Amex or whatever, get the host, and then it just gets consecrated that day in church.
Okay.
I don't know why I haven't heard that from anybody in the hierarchy.
They're working on it. Thank you. Steve?
I'm kind of new to this group. I've been going to the masses with the last couple of years, but I don't really live permanently in the area. I'm kind of just visiting for a couple of months with my friends, so I'm not really as active as the other people. So I'm a little bit reticent to make any opinions or state them. My question that I answered when I got the invite was when do they think confessions, or is that something that's going to be able to be done, instituted before the masses
Great, thank you.
resumed?
Ella, I know you have to bounce out, so why don't you tell people who you are?
Oh, hi, I'm Ella Milewska. I am the director of the Youth Faith Formation Department in the Archdiocese, and I'm a huge fan of Jane. So if Jane invites me to something, I show up because she's amazing.
Pat Latona?
Good evening. I almost didn't make it. Thank God Lydia was there. She sent me the link. Hi, I'm Pat Latona. I'm a member of the Social Justice Ministry at St. Francis de Sales, and I'm so happy to see everybody. It's been a long, long time. So I'm sending all of you a virtual hug.
Thank
Do you have any concerns you want? Is there anything particular that you're concerned about these days?
Everything.
That's what I figured. Hence the
Yeah.
social justice thing.
Yeah, right.
Great. Zimbabwe? I think you have to unmute yourself.
How about now?
Okay, gotcha.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Zimbabwe. I also am a member of the church and volunteered with the Social Justice Ministry as well as the Cabrini Coalition. And in terms of what I'm concerned about right now, it's the 100,000 plus dead because of the coronavirus, the state of the country in general, what happened in Minneapolis, and then what's happening now, the looting, which I think is taking away from the issues. So basically everything. I joined Pat the tone of that.
Okay, thank you. I agree. Donna? Donna?
Hi, everybody. I'm not from St. Francis de Sales. I'm actually from the Archdiocese of Newark, but I think Jane and Father Phil have made me an honorary member. So I'm just here lurking. I'm interested in hearing your concerns, and many of the concerns that you've expressed are my own concerns or the concerns I'm hearing from people that I'm working with as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Jim, as somebody who used to be here and is away, what are you thinking about these days?
Well, first of all, I just want to say hello to everybody. It's great to see so many familiar faces. I have missed you terribly, and it is for a wonderful and fulfilling and challenging conversation that I have joined you this evening. Just kind of sitting around today, speaking both with colleagues as well and my children, I think what's really on my mind is the world that we're leaving the next generation, and how we can go about beginning a systemic change in the world that they're going to have to lead in a few years. So that's kind of what's been burdening me over the course of the last few days, but especially today.
Sure, understandable. Nellie, you don't get to talk up a lot at church. What's going on in your head?
Hi, I'm Nellie. Most people may know me because my husband and my son, who's in a wheelchair, Ray, we go to church. So right now we're missing it terribly. We do watch the masses on TV, which is okay. Yeah, our concern is this quote unquote new normal. What would that mean coming out, especially with my son who's handicapped, how we're going to deal with that. But we have faith in God and things, we'll get through this as everything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, you made it in. You just have to unmute yourself. While Kathy is figuring that out, Griffin, what are you thinking about these days? Okay.
I know. I am concerned about everything, but mainly racism, among other things.
Yep. Okay. Kathy? Oh, you muted yourself again. I know I've missed a few people. Is there anybody dying to say what Tom, we haven't heard from you?
Hey, Jane, thanks. First, I feel relief to be back connected with the community that we missed. We're out of New York and have been for a couple months, but we already in the last 10 minutes or 15 minutes have felt warmer and more connected. The biggest concern I have, and it's been weighing on me for a while, was the expected, I think, social challenge of this summer. I think when this rolled out, there was the health issue, followed by the economic issue or issues. But I sense that when the summer comes and kids aren't engaged at home to whatever degree they are with their family, with their schools, and with daycare, pools, beaches, camps not available, and even before, I was really worried about the social challenges that especially the cities were going to have. And then, unfortunately, we all know what's happened in the last week, and that's, I'd say, exacerbated my concern and worry. And the challenge that I feel is understanding it, and to two of the folks who mentioned before, really trying how to help our kids. We've got 12-year-old and 15-year-old daughters understand in a normal, which this isn't obviously, situation, but even if we weren't, with the COVID crisis and we had the racial issues and situation and tensions going, it warrants real concern, communication, and then layer on top of it where we are. So that's for us the biggest challenge. But again, I'm glad to feel connected and have the community to help.
Great, thank you.
Jane,
yes.
I could say hello.
Good. Mary, there you are.
Hi, I'm Mary, and I'm kind of tired. It's been a long few months, and it's really kind of been really hard for me. But I'm hoping, and I think St. Francis is a place where we can, in our church, make some transformation and bring hope and changes because we're such a wonderful group of people and such a wonderful community, and it's very supportive for me. So that is very hopeful and helpful to me to be able to be privileged to be part of St. Francis. So thank you all.
Thank you. Lisa, how about you and your mom?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Lisa Kelly, and my mom, Geraldine, is with me. We're in Vancouver right now, but I normally split my time. My spouse is in New York right now. And I'm going to also be in the everything camp. And I'll just add into the mix, one thing that has concerned me certainly in the last few days, but this is a much longer standing problem, is the way that some people, including Trump, have weaponized religion and Christianity. And I think there's a lot of questions and responsibility on people of the Christian faith to be an important counter voice. And I think the Episcopalian officials at the church, as well as their overall, forget what his title is, he's an African American minister, their overall leader, I don't know the exact term for that, of the Episcopalian Church in the States, have been really vocal opponents as to what happened in Washington. And I think that's set a good example for what others of us could be thinking in that respect.
Yeah, these are definitely very trying and anxious times. But very much like Mary, I try and think of hope at the end of all this. And I just hope we will emerge from all this better, wiser people and more caring about each other. I think we've all had to stop and reflect, on how we live and how we really care about others. And I just hope that we will put this into action and all this is over.
So I want to make sure that our parishioners that speak primarily Spanish have a chance to say something too. So Blanca, I know Monse, you can speak both languages. I don't know if you would like to chime in here about a concern. ¿Tiene una preocupación en ese momento?
Bueno, la preocupación mía más que todo es ahora, pues, ustedes saben, como yo pertenezco al coro de la iglesia, al coro hispano, estaba yo pensando, ¿cómo vamos a hacer ahora para poder cantar? Que es lo que a mí me encanta. Y pues todo en la iglesia me gusta, ¿verdad? La convivencia que tenemos con los hermanos, con todo eso me está preocupando mucho, pero digo, después me pongo a pensar y digo, pues, Dios nos va a dar la manera de cómo vamos a poder trabajar en eso.
Great, thank you. Alfonso, would you like to translate that for her? Although I know I can.
No, I did. Actually, I discovered that you can, maybe it's useful. I mean, most of you are not paying attention at the chat feature, but I discovered that you can pin it to the right of your screen, so it doesn't interfere with because I know it's annoying, seeing the chat bubble popping up. So you can, you can pin it to the right side.
Okay. Dylan, was I correct in saying Blanca is missing, coming back to chorus, to the choir?
Yes, she's missing. Hi, everybody. I'm your music director. Yeah, Blanca is concerned with how we're gonna proceed with music during this, when we come back together, and how much she loves the choir and such, and how music is so integral to the parish.
Cool.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Go
Just
ahead.
to piggyback off of that. Hi, everybody. Hi, Dylan. Nice to see you. Just to piggyback off of that, we are also very, we've been thinking about it a lot and a little worried, the way Sky puts it. She's a little worried as to how the choir is going to come back. The youth choir is going to come back and get together and sing. She loves it so much, and she's a little bummed about it. And so I try to talk to her and say to her, you know, soon, one day soon, we'll get together soon. And I keep saying soon, but I don't know when it's soon. And I wish I could say to her, like, give her a definite time. This is when we're coming back, and this is when you'll come back for rehearsals and you'll get together. But we don't know. And just not knowing, you know, makes us uneasy, and it makes her uneasy, and she just misses it very much.
To give you a little peace of mind, just for the whole parish, just a little teaser, there's a lot of projects coming up, so don't you worry.
I see some names, but without pictures, but I see Christy too. So Christy, do you want to pop in on what you're concerned about?
Sure. So I had a staff meeting today at my job via Zoom. And I was actually really, really upset at them because there was zero mention of what was going on. And the night before, there was a very subpar, very like, we support, but, and I'm tired of hearing the but. I think we hear it I think our people have heard but way too long. And when you say but, it's basically like you're saying we deserve it. And I don't think people get that. So it's just frustrating. It's just really frustrating to get myself in a space of saying, let me just try to get over this. But I think it just puts me in a bad headspace.
Sure.
And I'm actually worried now because this is the first night of the curfew that Adrian actually has to get out of work at 11. So I'm like, oh my God. Like, those of you who know my husband, he's brown. like he's gonna have a backpack on. He's gonna be in street clothes. Like, are they gonna say something to him? Are they gonna stop him?
Yeah.
So I'm really worried.
Okay. Thank you. We'll worry with you. Did I miss anybody who wants to jump in on what they're concerned about and introduce themselves?
Just want to say hi. I'm Lacey, if you don't know me. And first I want to say, like, thank you so much, Alfonso, for these translations. Like, I feel like I know this is like really, really hard to do in real time, and I feel like I'm in the UN. So thank you. And yeah, I mean, my biggest concern, right? I mean, I have, like so many people, I have so many concerns, but I mean, my biggest concern right now is the assault on Black lives in this country, and the assault on people of color in general in this country, and the fact that our society allows it to happen time and time again. And, you know, I want to examine my role in the society and how I can be actively anti-racist. And, you know, I want to work with, you know, with the church and how to take action. So yeah, just to share like other people have.
Thanks, Lacey. You summed that up really well.
I'm Alice, and when the letter went out earlier in the week, or what is your concern? What are you most concerned about? And what I'm most concerned about is me. That is to say, it's a very personal thing of, in terms of what is church going to look like to me coming out, insofar as, you know, everything that I love, not everything that I love about church, but one of the things I like a great deal is the fellowship and the closeness and the groups and the kids that I work with on Mondays and the adults that I work with on Monday evenings, and the hospitality and the mass. And you know, I'm older and more at risk as far as COVID is concerned, but more to the point, I live much of the time, some of the time, with my sister who's older than I am and is quite vulnerable. So even if I felt that, you know, I could get back to a lot of the things that I love about the group nature, the community nature of St. Francis, I'm not sure that I would be willing to risk that if I'm coming back to visit and to be with my sister, who I believe needs me, you know, a lot during this time. So for me, earlier in the week, that was my big concern. What's church going to look like to me coming out of this? As the week went on, I've just heard so much truth coming from so many of you. You know, as the week went on, I thought,
I've lived through a lot of tipping points, a lot of points where something that we never thought would change changed. I'm not saying entirely, but it changed in some way. You know, not that we don't have a long way to go, but things in terms of women's rights changed at some point. Gay rights changed at some point. Not saying that we're done, but there was a tipping point where a majority of the society said, no, we are not doing this anymore. And I'm hopeful that this is the tipping point for this, for systemic racism in this country. And when I thought about that during the past week, I thought about the way that I want to deal with that is through church. I want to be a part of movement that starts in our church. And I thought, how am I going to do that? I mean, that now I'm feeling that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to really, not be on the sidelines just saying to people like Christy, oh no, really, we mean it, Christy, we or whatever, that I could actually be actively working on something, and that I'm having trouble envisioning. But I believe that it has to come from church. I think that for a lot of us anyway, I think what Lisa said is really prophetic in terms of, we're people like me, we're white Christians, and we have an opportunity to bring other white Christians with us in terms of things that we didn't know before, as Laura said, things that we just didn't get, we didn't, like in terms of white privilege. So this is a moment, if this is a tipping point in the country, it's a tipping point for us too. And that's what I'm most concerned about right now, is how am I going to be working that through the church?
Thank you. I think it would be fair to say that most of us are concerned about everything, and the particulars in everything would be the issues of racism and white privilege that have been put in front of us strikingly this week, as well as the virus and COVID, and how we come back to be a worshiping community together. And that when we come back, I think it was Kathleen who said it, and that when we come back, or when we're allowed out of our houses again, we shouldn't go back to whatever normal or usual was. That this is a transformative moment for us on every level. So I'm thinking that the conversation we want to have is, what are we called to do as Christians in this moment in time? What are the action steps we need to step into, or be brave enough or courageous enough to begin to look at, whether we're working at that from home and in relationships, or whether we're able to be out and in front of people. But what are the things as church that we're called to do? And Father Kelly, I don't know if you have any concerns that are different from what we heard tonight, or if you want to jump in at that point.
No, I'm anxious to continue to listen. My sense right now is that when we speak about church, and we're speaking about a church that is diverse here, but where we have quite a few white persons, I think our role right now is to listen, is to do a whole lot of listening, to be able to precipitate some sort of forum, I think, where people can talk and where we can be educated, so that we can begin to work for systemic change. We have said here before that we're uniquely located geographically on the edge of East Harlem, on the edge of the Upper East Side. Our work with the Cabrini Coalition was something I think that was prescient, and that we've recognized the need to be able to build bridges, to be able to create connections between communities. I think the crisis of the present moment is making that even more pressing upon us, and how we can begin to facilitate that. So, but I am open and will continue to be open for suggestions, ideas. I know, Lydia, you've reached out to the folks in the Social Justice Ministry at St. Charles Borromeo on 141st Street in West Harlem, and Holy Name over on 96th Street, our sister parish over on the west side. I'm somewhat disheartened that we haven't heard more of a Catholic response. The episode down in Washington the other day, I think Archbishop Wilton Gregory deserves an enormous amount of credit for being honest and for being, in some ways, breaking from the pack and speaking in a very prophetic voice as to how inappropriate that photo op at the John Paul II Center was. We have to begin to question why there aren't more voices. I see today Bishop Mark Seitz, who wrote a pastoral on racism and white supremacy a few months ago from El Paso. Is kind of an iconic picture of him with one knee down in solidarity with a number of other bishops. It's incumbent upon us to ask, where are the bishops? Where is the official voice of our church right now in terms of how it's going to help facilitate and be leaven in this conversation, in this movement? So that's my 2 cents.
Can I ask a question on that? Just because it's struck me somewhat. You know, Cardinal Dolan made a statement a couple days ago, but I felt it was a bit weak. And I don't know if he's done anything today, but I don't know if it's appropriate to send his office an email or to send a note and say, you know, are you going to say something more?
I think it's your right as a Catholic. If you have the question and you feel it's something that is of concern to you, I think, you know, I would like to think he'd appreciate that, to hear the voice of the people.
I know for a fact that 2 of our parishioners have written very strong letters to the Cardinal on some of his stances on these issues.
What did he actually say? I didn't read it. I'm just curious.
It was in relationship, as far as I know, I mean, there may have been more that he said, but it was in relationship with the coalition he belongs to, basically decrying and labeling the racism of what happened to Mr. Floyd in Milwaukee. I think, Griffin, it's on the Archdiocesan site.
So he did not speak on his own. He spoke in the context of that group. Is that correct?
I know that he made that statement with the group.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I don't know if he's spoken on his own about this.
No, he tweeted. It's just he had a Twitter comment, and all he said was, "We cannot remain silent." This is 3 days ago, after we watched the shattering video of a police officer keeping his knee on the neck of George Floyd, who was crying out, "I can't breathe." I join with CORL and all people of conscience to declare that all life is sacred. He didn't mention racism.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
All right. I'd like to go back to what we were just talking about. And I think when we were talking primarily about racism, which is now such a topic of very much concern and has been in this country for the past, since the beginning of when we were established. My suggestion is that unless, and I'm speaking primarily to the white parishioners who are on this particular Zoom call, is to really, we all need to, and our dear friends, members of other races as well, to really raise awareness about, number one, our own, and I think it was Alice mentioned the words white supremacy and what that actually means. And there's been a couple of very interesting articles and comments on the TVs related to what that actually means, or white privilege as more to the term I need to speak to, but also to understand what people of color go through, have gone through on a daily basis in this country. And the difference between what we go or our advantage versus what they go through. On my face, and I'll stop in a minute, but on my Facebook early this morning, there was a feed showing that the film called Just Mercy is now going to be shown free. It will be streamed free on most of our platforms, such as Amazon Prime. And I began reading the book. I know a couple of other people on this Zoom call have also read it, and it is an amazing story, extremely disturbing, but will give everybody, and I strongly advise everybody to actually look at it, and it will raise your awareness, your understanding of what it is like to be a person of color in this country.
Thank you.
There's also a Netflix documentary I would recommend. I think it's older now, but it's obviously on the feeds, and it's called 13th.
Right.
I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's
is that Laura? We actually showed that in the Social Justice Ministry a couple of years ago.
Yep.
So yeah, it's very, very good. We should read it. We should watch it again, but thank you.
So
one of add to Pat's.
Oh, okay.
An article in the National Catholic Reporter by Brian Massingale, and it's on. It's about 6 or 7 pages, based on white privilege, and I think that has come up. So you can get it. I can send it to you to get it. I have been trying to communicate that because it's really identifying what is happening with Black people and how much change has to be made in how we perceive it and how we have to be transformed if we're white, that we live in a certain structural way that is exclusive to the opportunities for our brothers and sisters. And that is this kind of change that has to be made. And I think that when I had a conversation with my brother today, and he said, we first have to change our way of thinking, and that will move us to new kinds of action. So sometimes we have to look at what's happening and think about it a little bit and say, why is this happening? Because we're ignorant about it.
We are. Kathleen, Father Kelly put that up on our Facebook page, that article.
There it is. Okay, so that's available. Great.
Facebook page. Yeah. Lydia, would you speak to one of the new pages on the Facebook on our website that you're working on in terms of
Absolutely. I will. I'm not going to share the link right now because it's being built and it's ugly. But tomorrow when we send you the thank you for coming, and we'll send you a link to this video, I will send you a link. It's going to be off of our webpage, and it's going to be a list of anti-racist resources. So we've already had some parents of local, of schools who are sharing some of their educational like PDFs and books for kids. We have TV shows that people can watch for adults. We'll include things like the Brian Massingale article, addresses for Cardinal Dolan if you want to write to him. Basically anything that's coming up that is related to this, we're gonna have just a whole page dedicated to that. Like I said, I'll share that tomorrow. And check especially our Facebook page, because we're putting stuff up constantly about just the news, what's going on, very theologically based. This is something that we will definitely continue to share information on and to keep a conversation open about. Like Father Kelly mentioned, we have been involved as a parish for the last 1.5 years with the Cabrini Coalition. So we've been working a lot with our local immigrant communities. In the last year or two, we've also done some really cool work with anti-racism. Actually with Father Massingale. Last June, he did a series of workshops up in Harlem. About a dozen of us were able to go and learn from him and learn from other Catholics. So I, like people have mentioned, I have been reaching out to my contacts within the Catholic world of New York. Many people are kind of watching and waiting. We're at a disadvantage because we're all stuck at home, so we can't meet. But I am a little surprised that there hasn't been more decisive action. I was hoping to partner with other churches and organizations as a way to move forward. But you know what? If no one else is doing it, we have to be the parish on 96th Street that does it on our own, then that's what we'll do. But yes, we're going to start with sharing information. Like Father Kelly said, we need to listen, we need to read, we need to educate ourselves. And in the next few weeks, we will be talking about this at masses, in the bulletin, online, on the webpage. So this is not a conversation that we are going to let, we're not going to sweep under the rug, at least not at St. Francis. So I will keep everybody in the loop.
Lydia, I'd also add to that. I know a couple of questions came up in terms of how do we frame this and everything that's going on for our kids. And one of the things that I've heard over and over from African-American friends, parishioners, I hear it throughout media, is what age an African-American child comes to that they have to have the talk. And the talk is mom or dad or mom and dad speaking to them about unequal and white privilege and all sorts of things that we're just beginning to learn about in many ways. Maybe we should have an equal talk with white children about what precipitates African Americans from having to have the talk with their kids in a way that's age appropriate and all sorts of things. There are all sorts of resources out there. Jane will be working with Lydia in terms of getting resources up for how do you frame racism for children and adolescents, because we certainly want to hand on a better world to the kids. I would, kind of coming of that age, I would point to Mr. Rogers, who would quote his mother, in times of crisis, in scary times, what do? You look for the helpers. So to just put those people that are on the front lines helping as models for the kids and as ways of showing that's where God is. God is in those people that are really trying to point out inequality and make a difference in terms of changing that. So I hope that's at least add something to the conversation, because I can imagine how difficult it is for parents at this time to be able to explain, in some ways, the unexplainable to young minds.
Thank you, Phil. Oddly enough, Jasmine and a couple of parents and I were talking last night about what resources are available specifically for kids. Jasmine works with 2-year-olds. I was going to say second graders, that would make sense. But she was looking for resources to have this conversation with 2-year-olds. And so the schools are doing a phenomenal job in putting out resources for families to use with kids. And Lydia and I are working on compiling all of that so parents can pick and choose what makes sense for them. One of the questions we usually end a meeting with, or Father Kelly is often known to say, what gives you hope? I think one of the things I'm really aware of this week is the incredible level of ignorance that I, as a white person, have had happily for the last 48 years, that I didn't have to pay attention to any of this, or nobody called my attention to it. But it was a parishioner a number of years ago who really just kind of challenged me to come to start to understand what white privilege means. So I'm reading and I'm learning and I'm trying to figure this out, and I'm trying to not be embarrassed that I didn't know this before a few years ago. I went to my nieces and nephews who were 18, 19, 21. They get it. They get it so well, they're teaching me. They're sharing resources with me and stuff that really makes it easy for a 60-year-old to understand this. So one of the suggestions I would have is talk to your grandkids and ask them what they know. There are all sorts of 30-second things on TikTok and the media that they're looking at and they're using to teach each other. I think we can't be afraid. We can't be afraid to have the conversation with our family. You know, my nieces and nephews are teaching me, but then I have to turn around and talk to my sisters and say, have you thought about this? Are you paying attention to this? And they don't want to have that conversation. It's a hard one to have. So we need to talk to each other. But we're putting together as many resources as we can find. And if you have good things, please share them with Lydia and I so we can curate a really good page. I stunned you all into silence.
You mentioned TikTok, Jane. I wanted to let you all know that the kids that have come up, like the movement, they're amazing. Because, you know, I mean, there's people of all ages on TikTok now because of this quarantine. So we've all used it as a form of entertainment. But some of the videos I've seen have been really sad, moving. These kids were protesting. I don't even know where they were protesting. And the cops in riot gear came to kind of push them back. And this young, I don't know how old she was, teenage, white girl stood and she pushed herself in front of a black boy that was on his knees with his hands up. And she basically was like, no, you're not. I'm not letting you. And I was like, oh my God. Like these kids.
They get it.
They get it.
They get it so much better than we did. You get it so much better than I do. You're a kid.
Jane, you know, we mentioned an article by Father Massingale, which is excellent in terms of resources. Griffin, I'd also salute you and all the folks at Commonweal. Before, I guess, all this even started, the last issue, you have a great article in it about the art of Dorothea Lange, which I just thought I used it as a meditation, actually, so thank you. The other article that spoke to me was by, his name escapes me now. He's a theologian up at Fairfield University, but it's on spiritual resistance.
Paul Lakeland. Yeah.
It doesn't speak specifically about racism, but it speaks about a number of the ills of our present time and how this in some ways is not new in terms of resistance during the Second World War to fascism and to all the evils that went on there. There was organized resistance on the part of a number of folks, and how that can be a lesson for us today, because the church as something that can help not only add to the conversation, but can change the dialogue. You know, in some ways we've lost our prophetic voice. This is a wonderful time to reclaim our prophetic voice and be there. And perhaps it is in that whole idea of spiritual resistance, how we go about things. So I'd recommend that article to you as a resource. We put that up a couple of days ago also.
I was going to say too, I think it's worth asking, why is it that we've lost our prophetic voice? It's the kind of question that Lisa raised back at the beginning. And I think that's part of what the church needs to unpack. It's an element of white supremacy and white privilege is the US bishop's cozy relationship with the Republican Party. And I don't know, my sense is that that's why we're not hearing as much about it. That's why we're not hearing from them. I think that needs to be talked about more candidly, even in a non-threatening way. But you know, because it's just that's as I view it, at least, that's one of the realities of it, and it just needs to be named, I guess. That's part of it. Yeah, that a majority of white Catholics voted for Trump. I mean, that's a fact. So anyway.
Somebody mentioned that 2 people here wrote letters to the Cardinal. I was one of them. I did it after the 24th meeting that he had with 600 people. And in it, he agreed with the president that the president was the best president in the history of America for Catholics. Well, that just threw me beyond. I was horrified, I was aghast, and it took me about 2 or 3 weeks to write the letter. I would be very glad if it would be appropriate to send it to Lydia because I sent it to him, and I'm also sharing it with other people. I don't mind that it becomes public. Of course, I have not heard back from him, but I wrote it from trying to say that he was really in violation of being a Catholic by the stance that he was taking. And if you think it's appropriate, I'll send it. You could put it on the website. You decide that. So I'll send it to Lydia tomorrow.
Thank you, Kathleen.
I also wrote a letter. On purpose, I didn't say that I was a parishioner at St. Francis de Sales because I didn't want to bind in St. Francis de Sales in any way. I just said it wasn't what Jesus would do, basically, with a couple more paragraphs. But that was about it. But I think we ought to realize that we have a right to do that. Go ahead. What can you lose? You're not. We're not going to get thrown out of St. Francis de Sales.
Well, Ginny,
I didn't mention
speaking
St.
as a
Francis
somewhat
de Sales.
formal representative here, we claim both you and Kathleen proudly as members of St. Francis de Sales. So we're blessed to have you both.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, Kristen. Kristen, you have to unmute
You have
yourself.
to unmute yourself.
Find it.
Sorry.
There you go.
Okay, to Griffin's point about unpacking, this may be simplistic, but I'm talking to a lot of people who say, well, they're from New York, so it's really not going to matter. We know where the way the majority of New Yorkers are going to go and the way of delegates. But I talk to a lot of good Catholics who say they detest Trump, so they're not going to vote for him. But they can't, in good conscience, vote for a Democrat because of the overall Democratic position on, I'm not even going to use the A word. They are so fixated. And when I say, well, yes, you have that feeling about abortion, I will use the word. But what about the right to life of the children who are taken from their families at the border? What about the right to a good life, et cetera, et cetera? They really do not see the connection. And when you're talking about unpacking, that is a huge issue. I don't know what to do about it. But that too many Catholics whom I know in my small circle who realize what a buffoon the president is, they don't see a continuum. They don't see that your attitude toward capital punishment has to be part and parcel of a right to life. And your attitude toward the way we treat the underserved and under-resourced and being willing to give up some of what we have to help others. So I don't know what you do about that, but that's an issue.
You're right, Kristen. There are lots of folks who don't get the whole continuum for the right to life. Phil, I think, said something in his homily or in the reflections at the end of Mass about wearing a mask was a right to life issue. And I thought that was brilliant because it is. This says, I care enough about you to keep you safe. But some people are so fixated on one part of that issue that they don't see the rest of it. So that's another place where we can certainly grow.
But I think and that's a place where the bishops have some room to recover some of their lost moral credibility. It's precisely because they're not speaking about things like the seamless garment, some bishops are, but as a body, they're not unified and they're not really, well, they're partly unified, but they're not speaking forcefully enough. I mean, you can speak, Pope Francis is doing a better job talking about what's going on in America than the US bishops are. There's a leadership vacuum, but that means there's also a leadership opportunity. So I don't know. I think I don't know, maybe I'm more hopeful than I have reason to be. But then again, it's like, well, Dolan doesn't control the church, God does. So it's not, and it's not to say that there's not, every single bishop has to agree with every single one of my political opinions, et cetera, et cetera. But the teaching capacity of the bishops, that's something that's been completely destroyed by the abuse crisis, by a number of other things. And I guess one question that might be worth asking is, how can the US bishops, united with Pope Francis, recover some of their lost credibility? And how can parishes contribute to that? That's maybe a question. Anyway.
An excellent question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing before I forget, and Alice, you touched on it, and Tina, you touched on it in terms of our elders and people that are kind of on the margin because of health concerns or age and all that. As we come back, we're still figuring it out, not just as a parish, but as a diocese, how we're going to come out, how many people will be in the church, and so on and so forth. But if I could invite everyone to help us with best thinking models to make sure, as we talk about seamless garment, that no one's left behind, that we're very conscious of the fact that this has given us an insight into how we already knew how important digital was, but how much more important it's going to be to keep people connected. So as we continue to move through this crisis, and I think the only time we're going to ever really have surety is when a vaccine is on the horizon or with us. So between now and then, how we can keep people connected and safe at the same time. So if you can continue to help us as a parish team with ideas of how we keep everybody in the loop. As some people are able to come back to church in some form or another, and others, it may be a little bit longer a period of time.
Can I just say one, respond to Kristen's concerns?
Mm-hmm.
And I am in total alignment with it because I deal with it all the time as well. I'm thinking that because they're so parochial, these individuals, and so have such blinders on, that take the political stance or the PR stance, and maybe we could develop talking points on, all right, so they're not going to vote for a Democrat or a liberal because of X, Y, and Z, but they only would vote for Trump just based on the fact that he is supposedly, an abortion advocate. So instead of floundering with, well, develop talking points aligned with the social justice principles, the Catholic principles that we abide by and align ourselves with, and what we do as Catholics, and say, well, yes, that might be true. However, this is his actions, his behaviors, his thinkings, his philosophy. These are his policies, which are totally against 99.9% of Catholic social justice principles.
That's a very cool idea. I am watching the clock, and we're at about 8:20. So we've been together for a little more than an hour. I always want to make sure if anybody has any last comments or hasn't had a chance to jump in and they'd like to, now is the time. If you're really thinking about this, you can always email us tomorrow and we'll add your comments into whatever we're putting together. But last licks.
I'd like to toot a horn here. One of our graduates from one of our schools in Michigan happens to live in Washington, D.C. And apparently sometime during the day today, there was a news story on, I don't know if it was on national TV or not, that yesterday there was a protest march in Washington, D.C., and it was happening at the time of the curfew. So what he did was he invited people to come into his house rather than being arrested for the curfew. So he had 70 people stay in his house overnight, and they left at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Faith in action.
Wow.
Yes, that was on TV. I saw it in the news.
Yeah, I heard that too. Well, well done, Brother Tim. I asked Griffin if he would take us out with a prayer this evening because I knew we'd be so anxious to talk to each other. We'd forget to do that at the beginning, but we should never be together and not pray. I think there are lots of ideas running around our heads and our hearts about how we want to continue to be present to the things that are our concerns. And as Father Kelly said earlier, I think for those of us who have the privilege of being in the majority, our job is to listen and to ask questions and to try to understand without feeling guilty. Griffin, would you pray with us?
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Loving God, thank you for this opportunity to be together and share thoughts, ideas, fears, frustrations, articles, suggestions. Thank you for giving us the freedom to speak. Thank you for giving us the wisdom of our parish staff. Be with us as we make our way through these difficult days, weeks, months ahead. Help us to be open to your Spirit active in our lives. Help us to be open to the change that is coming, whether we like it or not. Help us to remember you and forget ourselves. And help us to love each other as you love us. Amen.
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 Father Kelly, last words?
Stay safe and continue to check us out. Lydia's doing a great job with Dylan on social media. So all the news that's fit to print is there, local and universal and global and all sorts of things. So check us out and keep abreast of what's happening in the parish, and let's stay connected to one another. And as our good patron would say, live Jesus.